Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 4.3. We're back.
The series that keeps going.
Yeah.
It'll never end. How close is Aetheral Space to its end, actually?
Not very close.
Because I was thinking about this, right? And I know your chapters aren't as long as some other web series, but they're solidly lengthy. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to compare it too hard, but, I was thinking, right, that Worm's a pretty big web serial, and that ran for about 2 years at the same rate you do, 2 chapters a week. And you've been doing this for, 6 months now? 8 months? So I was wondering if you were, getting close to the halfway point, or if this was, more like a manga where it goes really, really long.
We're closer to a quarter than a half, is all I'll say.
Okay. So we still got a ways to go.
Yeah.
Closer forwards or backwards?
I'm not going to say that.
This guy. Alright. Well, last time on Aetheral Space, Dragon was being moody, Skipper was being Amuga Susibaka, and Masma took control of the spotlight. And aside from that, the only other big plot reveal was that the ambassador Dalcina was the widow the whole time, who was like Skipper's skipper, as Tan put it. But enough of that. You probably saw that episode earlier today, unless you're also an Amuga Susibaka.
Yeah.
So.
You'd be really weird and weird champ if you went for this one first.
Yeah.
And if you are like that, please don't watch my videos. Please unsubscribe. No, please don't. Don't.
Staring at the viewer right now. This guy watched 4.3 before 4.2. He's acting so weird. Are you all right? Is this Katia?
Yeah.
Katia Dalcina, the widow. Born in a time when Adrist had been thought of as nothing but another backwater iceball, Dalcina had served as the leader of Vantablack Squad, the UAP's most secretive and amoral Black Ops squad. She'd gathered them herself, a group of killers, criminals, and freaks that only she could corral to a greater purpose. Under her command, they'd assassinated disloyal officials, toppled disagreeable regimes, and struck at the UAP's enemies with devastating force. They'd been the UAP's dagger in the dark. It was all well and good for the Unified Alliance of Planets to portray themselves as a progressive government, forever reaching for a brighter future, but that image was painted in blood. Vantablack Squad had been the artists of that facade. After the dissolution of Vantablack Squad, she'd stopped off the map like so many of her contemporaries, but with a great deal of investigation and assistance from the Prince, Pierrot had managed to track down her new identity. It seemed after Adrist's rise to prominence, Dalcina had gone home, decided to serve her planet with less bloody hands. But the widow was still there. He could see it in her eyes. She's the Vantablack widow. I get it. But Hero couldn't even begin to guess how many people Dalcina had killed personally, almost definitely in the triple digits. Even so, he suspected the number of people who had died as a result of her orders would far outweigh it. Pierrot had made many terrible choices over the course of his career, but even he had to admit that Katia Dalcina was a monster. And here she was, smiling at him like a sweet old lady. Pierrot had stared down countless murderers in his lifetime, but even he couldn't help but feel the sweat run down his back. So good to see you well, she said genially, her shaped accent sharpening the W into a V. Oh, sorry. So good to see you well. I am always worrying about you boys and girls on the borders. These are dangerous times, you know? You are being careful? Always, Ambassador. Pierrot smiled, pouring himself a cup of coffee. They'd moved into a meeting room after Dalcina's arrival, one he had prepared in advance. How was Miss von Winterburn? I missed her at the last meeting of the Governing Council. Technically, he wasn't part of the Governing Council, so it wouldn't be unusual for him not to see someone there. Still, circumstances always seemed to arrange themselves with a good deal of prodding, such that Pierrot was always on serendipity when the most prominent officials of the UAP came together. The Tsarina is doing very well, Captain, but the constant trips between Adrast and Serendipity are taxing, even for a young woman. That was a lie. Pierrot knew for a fact that Agnes von Winterburn had returned to Adrust at that time to deal with an attempted coup from one of the rival ruling families. No loose threads of deception were present in Dalcina's voice, though. It seemed she was as adept a diplomat as an assassin. So I'm taking it this is sort of like an America situation where each planet's its own government and they're all loosely tied together by the UAP. Okay. Cool. Hero chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee as he sat back down. Youth, he said. I don't think I even remember how it felt to be young. I tried to forget about it myself, Dalcina replied. Things that seemed like such a good idea back then seem so embarrassing when you look back. She lifted her own glass of water with hands that had once strangled the Princess of Fiore and took a sip, ice tinkling at the bottom of the drink. Piero tracked the ice cubes with his gaze. "I was surprised with your choice of beverage," he said. "I'd have thought that with the amount of time you spent on Adrust, you'd prefer something warmer." Dalcina put the glass back down on the table between them. "The cold is home, Captain," she said calmly. "Wherever in this galaxy I go, I take home with me." Hero smiled warmly. "Admirable. And today you found yourself on the Unite Regent. I feel as though we're dancing around a topic here, Dalcina. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company?" He already knew, of course, but the time hadn't yet come to play that card. Excuse me. With a sigh, Dalcina clasped her hands on the table in front of her. "Of course, sooner or later, I suppose, we must come down to business, yes? There is a criminal in your custody, the man who calls himself Skipper. He has committed crimes against the Adrastan people. I'm afraid the Tsarina must demand you surrender him into our custody." "Lie. I wasn't aware of that. I brought that man in based on the recent upheaval of Talden." "Talden?" Her brow furrowed, surprise piercing through her mask of calm for just the briefest moment. Yes, she remembered Talden. "Where the Nendon mines are?" "The very same. You're familiar?" He prodded at the open wound just a little, hoping to spark a useful reaction. He didn't have any luck. Her false face had already returned. "Only by reputation," she lied. "Although I have heard the casinos there are spectacular. One day I will find the time to visit." "I'd recommend them, certainly," Piero said. "We stopped at Talden for just a brief time, so I unfortunately didn't have the chance for shore leave either, especially with the upheaval I mentioned. It seems the president was assassinated." Dalcina blinked. "You think this man Skipper did that?" He sipped his coffee. "I strongly suspect it. He knew it for a fact." "All the more reason to hand the criminal over to Adrust," Dalcina went on, not missing a beat. "I'm sure you're aware, but Adrust has one of the most secure prison systems in the UAP. The number of successful escapes has been in the single digits ever since they were established. It only made sense for a planet consumed by an eternal blizzard to have a secure prison system. Even if a prisoner managed to break out of the prison complex itself, they had no recourse against the scathing winds and freezing cold. From what Pierrot understood, most people barely lasted half an hour without adequate protection. Brutal, but effective. Pierrot drummed his fingers over the table as if considering Dalcina's proposal. That wasn't actually the case, obviously. In reality, he was deciding whether the time had come to dispense with that charade. He glanced at Dalcina's glass of water. It was near empty. Nothing else for it, then, the prince concurred. "So he is the prince!"
Well, he thinks about it in a strange way. What could it mean?
Oh, is he like a fucking Serena Bruno situation?
Who can say?
Is the prince in his mind?
Who can say?
Is it his stand, even?
Oh, it's a standish name.
The Prince. I do have one concern, Ambassador, he said quietly, taking a sip of his own coffee, savoring the warmth of it while he could. "And what is that? We can discuss what needs to be discussed, yes?" "My concern," Piero said, looking her in the eye, "is that if I hand your former subordinate over to you, he'll mysteriously never find his way to an Adrustan prison." Dalcina's kindly smile froze on her face, and the second it did, Piero felt the temperature in the room drop significantly. Is that like metaphorical in that like it feels tense, or does she have some power that's actually? In the time it took for the widow to open her mouth and speak again, frost had already begun forming on the surface on the table, I assume of the table, and what little remained of their drinks had frozen in their containers. I see, the widow said, her previous demeanor replaced by a business-like ruthlessness. "So that's the situation we are in." "I'm afraid so," Piero nodded, ignoring the ice now holding his hands to the table, "and I'm afraid this intimidation you're attempting won't work on me. Please watch." There was a deep mechanical humming from somewhere under the floor, and as if on cue, the heating in the room intensified, overpowering the cold the widow was producing, and quickly melting the ice that had already formed. "The heating in this chamber has been set to balance out any adjustments you might make," Piero said casually by way of explanation. "If you make it colder, the room will just become warmer to compensate. An elegant solution, wouldn't you say?" The widow raised an unimpressed eyebrow. "And what exactly is stopping me from reaching over the table and smashing your head in? Have you perhaps not considered that?" Pierrot's smile didn't leave his face. "You think you can kill a Unite Fleet captain on his own ship and get away with it?" "It wouldn't be the first time." A chill, not from the temperature, ran down Pierrot's spine, but he knew he couldn't allow petty fear to distract him. His eyes flicked down to the glass of frozen water on the table between them, nearly empty. "You're out of practice, though, Widow," he said, as casually as he could manage. "I'd expect a former assassin to watch what they put into their bodies." The widow's gaze followed his own, and she sighed as she looked at the glass of frozen water. "Poison, yes?" "Yes. How deadly?" "Quite. The microcapsules inside that drink will decay in approximately 1 hour, releasing the toxin into your body. With a single call from me, the antidote can be here in good speed." "Well," the widow leaned back in her chair, staring at him with cautious eyes, "it seems I am your captive audience." Pierrot felt a rumble of approval from the prince. The necessary conditions for this lesser goal had been cleared, and he allowed himself the slightest smirk of celebration. "Yes," he said, "it seems that you are." "Sorry, there's so much phlegm in my throat, I'm going to have to pass it to you."
No worries. The black-haired girl, she'd introduced herself as Underman Rose, barely stopped to breathe as she led Skipper and Ruth through the ship, explanations and trivia pouring from her mouth without end. "So, mainly," she said, hugging her script against her chest as she walked, "the United Regent is a peacekeeping vessel, but Assault Sea-class cruisers, that's the kind of ship the Regent is, by the way, and can take on a multitude of tasks, like a lot, I mean. Transporting cargo, repairing other vessels, sometimes we even do science missions, like exploring newly discovered planets, that's always fun." "Neat," Skipper said. As he walked, hands stuffed into the pockets of his long coat, he watched the mess hall below. The sides of this hallway were windows, and from this position he could pretty much see the entirety of the culinary chaos below. He wasn't quite sure from this high elevation, but he thought he could see Dragan and Bruno. Their clothes a stark contrast to the uniforms of the crew members, sitting at one of the tables, with a couple of undermen and what seemed to be another outsider. Masma reference?
"Masma?"
Looked like an interesting chat. You'd have to ask about them later. "It is neat, isn't it?" Rose said excitedly, looking over her shoulder as she walked. "It really is top of the line. We've got room for 1,000 crew members at a time. I know that doesn't sound like much for a ship of this size, but that's the great thing about it, really. A lot of it is automated. Oh, I haven't even told you about Marco yet." Skipper blinked. "Oops," he said, drawing out with some obnoxiously loud yawn. "Marco is the ship's auto-brain," Rose explained, now walking backwards so she could face her audience as she talked. "Like a normal automatic, but for thinking, hence the name. It runs the automatic systems, makes sure all the things you don't see are working right, scans surrounding space for threats, that sort of thing." She put her mouth to a microphone panel on her script. "Say hello, Marco." There was a second's delay, and then a synthesized male voice came through a speaker perched high on the wall. "Hello, Marco," it said, perfectly neutral. "Just a little joke," Rose smiled. "I mean, the technicians came up with that joke, not the auto-brain. It's not smart enough for stuff like that, but I think it's funny." She glanced at Ruth. "Do you think it's funny?" Ruth looked away from the mess hall down below, blinking blearily. She clearly hadn't been listening. Yeah, sure." "Great!"
Oh, I'm identifying so hard with poor Rose right now.
Rose grins.
She's making an effort, damn it.
Smoothly turning a corner even as she walked backwards. She continued to stare at Ruth. The red-haired girl in question glanced away, clearly uncomfortable from sustained attention. Ruth could be shy, Skipper knew, when she wasn't ripping heads off. She said, clearing her throat. "What's up?" "Oh," Rose blinked as if she realised she'd been staring. No, sorry, I didn't mean to offend. It's just my family's from Talden, you see. I heard about what you guys did there, how you saved everyone. I just wanted to thank you." Seems everyone somehow had knowledge about the events nobody was there for. Skipper liked to think the best of everyone, but even... I forgot I did this again. No, once...
You can't do it twice.
But even he had to admit this is more than a little suspicious.
Suspicious?
He cocked his head at Rose as they walked. "The captain tell you about that?" She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I'm his aide, you see, so I hear about things a lot. It's hard work, but really rewarding." Captain Pierrot had a way of finding things out then, clearly. Maybe he was just a constant wearing eye contacts? Nah, hiding something like that would be way too much trouble for too little reward. But there was something Captain Pierrot was pretty damn keen to keep hidden. Rose turned back forward as they went around a corner, the clear windows replaced by smooth white metal. "If I could ask a question, Miss Blaine," she said quietly, facing away from them, "why is it you do what you do?" Ruth blinked. "What do you mean? Is there a cause, or is it the kind of thing we're in the right place at the right time?" "I don't think I'd call it the right place. I almost died. A whole bunch of people almost died." "But they didn't," said Rose, her voice strangely far away. "That was just down to luck, then? You weren't fighting for anything in particular?"
Wait, what the fuck did they do before Dragan? I know they had other members, and clearly they were doing something before whatever they kidnapped Dragan for. Were they like criminals? Or were they just, like, people?
They were just guys getting cash and following Skipper's goals, TM.
I guess.
Ruth's eyes flipped to...
No, they were definitely criminals, because isn't that
Yeah.
why Ruth was taken in and the trap worked, because she was a criminal?
Well, yeah, in the Supremacy she was a criminal. Not necessarily in the UAP.
Right.
Ruth's eyes flipped to Skipper, then back to Rose's back. I was just trying to survive. That's what everyone fights for deep down, right? At those words, Ruth sighed, and as Skipper watched, she seemed to stand up a little straighter, as if some deep anxiety had been washed away. Yeah, she exclaimed, voice brighter. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Oh, I haven't even shown you guys the hydroponic gardens. Skipper grinned mirthlessly. This was going to be a long day. Would you like some popcorn?
Yeah. So, Pierrot smiled, having finally finished his proposal. What do you think? The widow's expression didn't shift. Insanity. Pierrot's smile flipped into a genuinely hurt frown. You think so? I've put a great deal of thought into this proposal. I don't think it's crazy at all. Do you understand why Vanta Black Squad disbanded? The widow spat, her glare ever present. We were a group formed to kill the UAP's enemies, especially those who didn't know they were enemies yet. We killed and killed and killed, and some of us got a taste for it. Once you're addicted to murder in that way, you become everyone's enemy. We were no longer fit for purpose. Your boy Skipper doesn't seem, as you put it, addicted to murder. The widow conceding
nodded.
that. The widow nodded, conceding that at least. The boy was different. While he was with us, he was more like an automatic than a person, as if the thoughts inside him had frozen over and needed to melt before he could be alive again. There wasn't anything there to become addicted. Hero leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, fingers steepled over his stomach. The prince stirred within him like a serpent, and he listened to its hiss. Please understand this, he said softly. I don't care how much you enjoy what you do. I don't care whether you go overboard during the course of your activities. All of it, is irrelevant to me. There are things that I need to happen to achieve my goal, and you are the person with the ability to make those things happen. Nothing else matters, nothing else is real. Just that one thing. His eyes were still closed, so Pierrot could only hear what the widow said. Her voice was tinged with curiosity. And what is this goal of yours, Captain? He smiled slightly. Peace and joy for all mankind. And what is it that you need to happen? Pierrot opened his eyes and stared, unflinching, into the bright light overhead. His heart settled into stone. There are good people who must die. Then, in the very second those words left his lips, there was a distant bang, the sound of an explosion shaking the deck beneath them. A moment later, the lights went out. So many things. What is this prince inside him? Mechanical, curious, hissing. Is it a snake? Who does he need to die and why? What the fuck is the widow up to? Skipper, will he have the PTSD? Who knows? There's so many things. I don't have a question. It's hard to think of a question for this week. This was another good chapter, though. Honestly? Hello?
Hey.
I know we're only 3 chapters in, and it's not that the last arc was bad by any means, but I already think this arc is shaping up. I think I like this one more than the last one.
It was a lot faster paced, I think.
Yeah, every chapter's got something that holds your attention. Arc 3 had a few chapters that was like the in-between, but this, it feels like there's so much gripping me, so many questions right away that I want answered. It's like got me invested. I'm really into it. The characters are really coming alive here, and I'm excited to see what you got planned. And I also agree the faster pace makes it more entertaining. I don't know what my question is for this one. It's hard to think of these every week, especially on the spot.
Well, we heard about some Address law, so that's going to be coming up later. So, yeah. So, big snowy planet.
Yeah.
Lots of prisoners.
True. Lots of wait, there's more than just one?
Yeah, there's a lot. They used to be poor as shit, and then they were like, we have all this fucking land, let's stick people in it and charge people for the luxury.
It kind of is it's kind of smart, though, because if it's so cold that it's that deadly, and they put prisoners in there with heating from the buildings, they can't really escape prison without dying.
Yeah.
And they can't be charged for murder because it's like, oh, the environment did it. That was their fault.
Yes,
ball.
it's very cutthroat on that trust.
It's also kind of clever and smart, and I appreciate it. But the whole planet's cold. There's no like warm spots at all.
There are no warm spots.
So it's probably very distant from the sun, like Pluto. Not as far as Pluto, obviously, but it's cold. No warm spots at all, huh? Not even in like the closest part of its orbit.
No, it fucking
at the
sucks.
very equator. How does anyone live there, or do they not? It's just prison.
Well, there've had people who live there, but not easily.
You have to have heavy clothing, the right kind of...
Yeah, or very nice
clothes,
heating, yeah.
Alright, well, it's been a ball, y'all. That was a great chapter. I'm eager for more. I think my fellow Aetheral Space Chads are going to agree that this week's a banger for Aetheral Space Chads across the board. 2 solid episodes. And, yeah. And, of course... If you agree that it's such a banger, then you should go... There's a little site. Not a lot of people know about this. It's called Royal Road. And if you look up the words Aetheral Space, you actually will find a word-for-word copy of what we're reading here.
What?
And you can leave a review on it.
But that's impossible. Who's uploading that?
I know. It's some weird guy named Tanhony.
But Darnell, I'm Tanhony. Next time on Doctor Who.
Oi, we gotta put the fucking sonic screwdriver in the Royal Road review. On Doctor Who.
That's what happens.
Alright, bye.
And then the Daleks show up.
Yeah. Remember that part where Rosa Parks is canonically more powerful than the reconnaissance Dalek?
Yeah.
Nice. No one's gonna get that unless they know about the Doctor Who trading card game.
Bye.
Bye!